I shot a police officer, and I was in jail waiting for my trial.
There was no question that he was going to face the death penalty.
My only chance at staying alive was to escape. I had to get over the wall in the rec area or dig my way out of the cell.
There's never been an inmate that ever got out by digging through the walls.
This is a true story.
I'd need to use the limited materials we were given and my skills as a construction worker.
It's a dramatized account based on the escapee's own recollections and legal documents.
I had to keep calm. This was my one chance.
I've never seen an escape like this before. It's brilliant.
Come outside with your hands up!
I honestly felt somebody would end up killing John Parsons in a shootout.
My name is John Parsons. In April 2005, I was paying child support for 3 children. I was under extreme amounts of stress, so I turned to crime. Soon after, I found myself in a chase, leaving a robbery scene.
I've known John for many years. He just progressed into more serious crimes. He was getting more violent, and he could be capable of just about anything. Officer Cox was just returning home, visiting his parents, and their paths crossed.
I didn't even realize it was a police officer. When I looked back and I seen the man fall down and I realized I'd shot him, I was in a state of panic and shock. And I instantly felt sick and terrified.
Words just can't express the feeling for the loss of Larry Cox. He's just one officer that I'll never be able to replace.
This would have been the first personal, close contact friend of mine that had ever been killed in the line of duty. So, you know, I wasn't ready for it, to be honest with you. It just shocked me.
I was arrested, and now I was in jail, waiting to be put on trial for the murder of Officer Larry Cox.
Empty his pockets.
And I knew it was a trial I couldn't win.
Spread him.
If you kill a police officer in the performance of his duties, you are going to face the death penalty.
I could get life in prison, but I was pretty sure I'd be sentenced to death. I felt I had nothing to lose. And my only chance of staying alive was to somehow escape before my trial. But they put me in isolation, where I'd have no chance to escape.
Our county jail that we've built here in Ross County is just as secure as any prison. In many cases, it's probably more secure.
Every day was a struggle to fight off slipping into deep depression and self-pity. I felt like a lot of people I cared for did or even should hate me. But I had to stay focused on getting out of solitary and planning my escape. Legally, they weren't able to keep me in isolation without a reason. So I figured if I acted like a model inmate,
Time's up.
they would eventually let me into the general population.
Whatever you say, boss.
And then I could begin to plan my escape.
John Parsons was very skillful at concealing, or what we call using a duck blind. He was trying to use his personality to get people to believe that he was trying to follow all the rules.
Thanks, boss.
And it lowers your ability to suspect him of something that's illegal.
He stayed in there for several months, and he was very polite, never a problem in prison. So the prosecuting attorney at that time and the judges, they said, why don't you just go ahead and move him back in the general population? Well, I didn't really want to do that, but there was nothing to show that he was causing an issue.
Parsons, moving you to general.
So we moved him back into the general population.
had kept my cool, and it had paid off. Apart from being locked in my cell at night, I could pretty much move around the pod as I wished. And now I was able to join the other prisoners for outdoor recreation.
On days the weather's not bad, we can take the inmates outside into the rec area. However, the standing order still stood that when he had his rec time, he wasn't supposed to be with the other inmates.
My trial date was just 3 or 4 months away. I needed to plan my escape seriously and put it into action immediately. I thought maybe I could find a way to escape from the rooftop recreation area. But the wall itself presented a huge challenge. I judged it to be about 18 feet tall. Then open air, protected by a fence and 2 rolls of razor wire. It looked intimidating. So I decided to continue to ponder it while I tried to find an alternative.
They keep y'all locked up here too?
John was able to manipulate people and was a polite individual.
And what crimes y'all commit?
But he also had that mean side of him inside that robs people and threatens people. He would be like a Jekyll and Hyde.
All the cells had a small window on the exterior wall. If I could somehow get through that wall, I would be outside. Then I could drop down to a lower section and run to a steep tin roof. From there, I would drop 15 or 20 feet into an alley that ran along beside the jail.
John wasn't a dumb person. You know, he could have made something out of his life, putting his talents or mind to more constructive areas within the community. But he chose the road of as a criminal.
Before I could even consider how to start digging around the cinder blocks, I needed to solve the challenge of how to cover up my work quickly.
Head count.
Because they did head counts 4 or 5 times a day.
Okay, the head count gives us an opportunity to check the inmates. We'd have the inmates stand still. The officer comes through, check each inmate, do a visual inspection of the cell block, and then go to the next cell block.
I needed to create some kind of mortar that would look just like the real thing. Before I turned to crime, I used to work in construction, so I figured I could come up with something that would work. I'd have to use the materials that they gave us. Mixing toothpaste and talcum powder was a good place to start.
You got any mint-flavored toothpaste?
Nah, we got what we got.
I don't claim to be a genius, but I do think I'm smarter than a lot of people in the jail with me. Or maybe I just put more thought into things than a lot of them would. Most people you deal with in jail don't seem to think too much before acting. I finally got the right texture. But it wouldn't dry. And it was definitely the wrong color. I was stumped.
Okay. Wow. Can't have me too.
One day I was watching the other inmates play cards, using Jolly Ranchers as chips. And then I hit on it. If I could get enough blue and green candies, I could melt them together and maybe get a match for the color of the cell wall. I put the Jolly Ranchers and toothpaste in a baggie and ran hot water over it constantly. Then I kneaded it together to dissolve the Jolly Ranchers into the toothpaste. I started telling other inmates those were the only candies I liked. and I made deals with them to get me more. Now I had my mortar, I needed a tool, so I could begin to dig through the wall. The metal louver slats in the air vents were about 5 inches long, welded in place at both ends, and I couldn't do much more than bend them a little with my bare hands. So I used one of the hard plastic mugs that our milk was served in at breakfast. I was ready to start digging. I had no idea how long it was going to take. I just hoped I'd be finished before my trial.
Inspection.
This is a dramatized account of a prison break based on letters from escapee John Parsons. He's attempting to dig through his cell wall when he's interrupted.
I was scared that the deputy would inspect more closely and notice where I'd been digging. I didn't want to come that close to being caught ever again. I decided to start digging real soon after a head count, so that they weren't likely to come in again real soon. I could only afford to work for about half an hour, then hurry to fill it in. At this rate, I wasn't even sure if I'd be finished before my trial started in a couple of months. Because progress was so slow, I decided to stay behind when the other inmates went to recreation, so I could spend more time working on the wall.
You coming?
I pretended I was working on my case. Nobody questioned me normally. They gave me my space.
We've never had an inmate since I was sheriff. There's never been an inmate since the facility was built that ever got out by digging through the walls.
Pretty soon after I started digging, I encountered a problem. There was some thick, heavy gauze wire mesh between the cinder blocks. I already had blisters and sore spots on my hand. And then I discovered that some of the holes that went through the center of the cinder blocks were poured solid with concrete. I filled those areas back in and moved to the next block over.
Okay, so tell me what they put in here.
Sometimes the stress was almost unbearable. I was either going to get the death penalty, spend the rest of my life in prison, or escape and live in hiding for the rest of my life. I always tried to block it out and not think too much about it if possible, by trying to stay focused on my plan. I was finally making headway, but this gave me a new problem. My tool was too short. To dig deeper, I'd have to find a way to splice the slats together into a longer tool. I couldn't see anything that would do it in commissary, but I did pick up some other things I thought would come in handy. Then I took a look at the cleaning supplies. I noticed the brooms had steel tie wire wrapped around them where the straw bristles were attached to the wooden handle. I used the tie wire to splice some slats together, lapping over each other an inch or so. Then I bent one end into an L shape for a handle to make it easier on my hands. Now I had a tool that I could use like a drill, and the digging went much quicker after that. I realized I'd have to backfill the holes with something to keep from having to fill it entirely with my limited mix of toothpaste. So I made sticks of paper mache using toilet paper, wetting it, shaping it, and letting it dry. Finally, a month after I'd started, I dug enough to get the cinder block loose. I pulled it out. I could see a layer of red brick, and I knew that on the other side of that layer was freedom. But after the new paint job, some of the deputies became a lot more prickly about any specks of dirt on the walls. Deputy Miller was a new deputy. He seemed to be really picky and prissy about anything being dusty or dirty. One day he came around early.
Inspection.
And the little 1-inch wide hole I'd just made and patched in was still kind of wet and had a bit of dust from the mortar on it. The deputy noticed that little spot and touched it. He had no idea that right beside that 1-inch spot was a loose block, with my digging and patching materials hidden inside.
Looks like someone's been digging here.
I don't know.
I was fighting to keep a straight face, and not show the panic I was feeling. Months of work for nothing. I felt like my heart was pounding out of my chest, and I was about to hyperventilate.
But it'd be good if you get someone to fix it. I don't want to get blamed for it.
I get maintenance to come in and take a look.
This was on a Friday, and I knew that by Monday afternoon someone would come and look at that wall, and I'd be in the hole. That did not leave me enough time to get through the rest of the wall.
Deputy Miller said that it would appear that some of the mortar around some of the blocks had been tampered with. Not removed, but tampered with. And we put it down, we'd make out a work order, turn it into maintenance. It would place in the jail log of the observation of the correction officer.
I'd spent months on this plan, and now I had 48 hours to pull off a completely different escape. Escaping during recreation was the only other choice I had. If I could get over the wall, then I could run to a spot on the roof where I could slide down to a lower section and follow my original escape route. But if I were to find a way to reach the top of the wall, the razor wire would be an obstruction, preventing me from being able to reach the fence behind it. I could use the metal slats to solve the problem. I had about 20 in my wall. I bent them into S shapes. I ripped up the sheets and braided rope, then attached the hooks to pieces of the rope. I'd use them to pin back the razor wire so it wouldn't snag me. I also braided a rope ladder that would hang from a hook from the fence with a band of newspaper to stiffen the steps. I needed a pole to hoist the ladder up. I used 4 3-foot sections of rolled up paper that could fit together into one long pole, about 12 foot long. On what would be the top section of the pole, I rigged an arm coming out off the tip of it, at an angle of about 120 degrees. All that night I stayed awake, knowing it was going to be risky with so many witnesses out there, and a camera and deputies that could spot me so easily. By Saturday morning, I had everything together, and I was ready for them to let us go to recreation. I put my red clothes on top of my blue clothes, and after lots of adjustments and tying stuff to my legs and torso, I was able to conceal my ladder, straps, and sections of the pole inside my clothes without it being too noticeable. Getting past the desk was the first step. I was hoping they wouldn't break their habit and search me.
Hey, what do you got there? You can't take anything into the yard.
I had to keep calm. This was my one chance. On Monday, they will discover what I've been doing, and they'll put me back in solitary, and I'll stay there until I get convicted. Now I was out in the rec yard, and this is where my big challenge began. Recreation was only 1 hour, and I knew if I got away, it would be in the first 10 minutes, while they were still busy with paperwork. There were 2 ways I could be spotted, either by the deputies looking through the window onto the rec area or on CCTV camera. But I was pretty sure that the camera would have a blind spot. Deputies couldn't see the entire rec area from behind the desk. The best spot was right above the camera, where I figured neither the camera nor the deputies could see me. But the razor wire there was grouped into a tighter pattern with little gaps. The other spot had bigger gaps in the razor wire and also had a small outcrop of building that I might be able to climb up. But I was pretty sure it was in view of the camera. I was real close to being inside of the deputies. I decided to try the first spot. I went around all the prisoners and told them what I was doing.
Keep your mouth shut.
And not to snitch on me. I assembled the pole, attached my rope ladder to the end, and lifted it up. But after several tries, I decided the grouping of razor wire there was too tight, and I couldn't get through to the fence. This was the only safe spot, and now it was out of the question. Now I was worried. I was much more likely to be seen by the deputies in the other spot. And it was in full view of the camera. This was one of the most nervous times of my life, knowing how easily I could be caught. I positioned myself next to the small outcrop of building. I had to work as quickly as possible and hope that by the time they noticed, it would be too late. I reassembled the pole. And after a few tries, I was able to hook the ladder to the fence. I used the building to help myself up. I climbed up, hooked one leg over an upper ladder step to hang on, and used my hands to work with the razor wire and make an opening. Then my prison uniform got snagged, so I had to leave it hanging there, like a red flag. I was finally on the roof of the jail. The hardest part of the escape was over. I had about a 20-foot drop into the alley. The soles of my jail shoes were thin. It would be like dropping 20 feet barefoot. But I had no choice. I jumped.
John Parsons has escaped from jail in Ross County, Ohio. He is now on the run.
It was at 12:30 on Saturday that I got a call that there was an escape at the county jail. I said, well, who escaped? And they said, John Parsons. Disbelief, angered. How could this happen? Why did it happen? All these things was going through my mind.
Angry, shocked, you know, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that John Parsons had got out of jail.
There was a lot of luck that went with John's escape. We believe that there was a diversion within the jail to draw the attention of the other CO. We believe John Parsons made his daring escape at that particular time. Also, the camera out in the rec area was just a outdated camera. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, and luck was on his side. There was a note left behind directed towards me saying, "Bye, Ron." I can only take that on John trying to be, humorous. He thought it was funny, I suppose.
I felt he was out of the state by the time that we got notified, because there was probably anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour lapse between the time that he actually escaped until the notification was made.
My plan was to leave the country, but the person who was supposed to give me a ride out of town let me down. I needed to leave the area as fast as possible, so I stole a bike and started heading the 7 miles towards Frankfort, where I used to live. I knew the cops would be there soon, but I had no choice. I needed help. To make things worse, I had broken my foot, so I could barely pedal. When I came to a hill, I had to get off the bike and push.
I was getting ready to go down to Carter Lumber to pick some lumber up. So I got in the truck, went down over the hill, and seen a guy pushing a bicycle up with a t-shirt wrapped around his head. Well, it was kind of warm that day. But he turned his head away from me when I went past him. I said, this don't seem right. And my boy was mowing grass up there at the right edge of his property. I told him, I said, did you see the guy that escaped from Ross County Jail?
Yeah, I think I just seen him coming up the road. I think he's coming right over that hill.
So we stood there for a few minutes.
There he is, there he is.
And he come up around the corner.
That's him, there's no doubt that's him.
And then all of a sudden he looked up, and as soon as he looked up, he knew we was watching him. So my boy took off running down there where he'd went in the woods, off the side of the road. Scott got on his cell phone right then and called 911.
I'd been chief for 7 years, and that's the first time I ran from my house, lights and siren in my car. We responded immediately to that scene, and we're at the exact location where John Parsons had went into the woods off this bicycle. We could secure the perimeter just because that was the perimeter was the roads that encircled it.
We literally put a ring of steel around a 3-mile area.
It was probably some of the most rugged terrain in Ross County, but we felt we probably had a pretty good shot at him.
I had a head start on them. Soon I could hear the bloodhounds and helicopters approaching. So I was trying to keep moving as fast as I could, while doing as much backtracking and zigzagging as I could, throw the hounds off.
We gridded off at the area and did skirmish lines and went down through the woods inch by inch looking for John Parsons.
I felt that John Parsons would not be taken alive. I honestly felt we would end up, or somebody would end up killing John Parsons in a shootout.
I was headed in the direction where there seemed to be the least noise from quad bikes or dogs barking. Pretty soon that forced me into a bottleneck. I knew I couldn't cross any fields or I'd be spotted in the open. I decided to head up towards Route 28 and hope that I could somehow make it across.
There was officers stationed every so many hundred feet apart that had eye contact with each officer. If he would get out into the open area, that an officer would see him.
Above me there was a plane and at least 2 helicopters circling over.
We brought in some helicopters that had some thermal imaging devices. If this would have been October, November, where the leaves were off the trees and all that, it'd have been over within an hour. It just, the visibility was zero once you got under the foliage, and that foiled the infrared stuff, and he knew it. John Parsons knew that.
By the time I reached the wood line along Route 28, there was too much law enforcement traffic. I had no choice but to look for a good place to hide and hope they didn't find me, while I waited for the right moment to cross.
First 36 hours of that, I never went home. And even after that, I'd go home, take a shower, get 4 or 5 hours sleep, and then we would be right back out there in the woods.
Temperatures in the wood there probably 110 degrees or hotter maybe. You could only work the dogs maybe 30 to 45 minutes. You had to bring them out of the field to cool them down.
We knew John Parsons was suffering a lot worse than we were. I mean, the conditions were very harsh. John Parsons wasn't going to last long out there.
I hadn't had anything to drink since the escape. I had to come out of my hiding spot and find water. I was having trouble even thinking straight. I knew it was a huge risk, but I was desperate. That night, after midnight sometime, I started moving along the wood line, trying to find a gap in the vehicles where I could cross Route 28. I began keeping count on how long between each pass of helicopter or plane. At that time, it was averaging about 45 seconds in between flyovers. Now there was no turning back. I sat there until it seemed like there was silence from the road and above. And then I ran. I couldn't believe it. I'd made it across without being seen. But I knew they weren't just going to give up. It felt like the entire world was trying to hunt me down.
We felt that at 72 hours, he had gotten out of the perimeter. So we used every asset we had to try to pin him in. We just didn't get the job done. There was only one place he was going to go, and that was family. So we started doing some intense surveillance and interrogation of the family. All his friends and, even some of his relatives are saying that he was an outdoorsman. We learned that his mother had a tent and some other items set up on their back porch that John was supposed to come in and pick up, but he never came in and got it.
After I had gotten through the perimeter, I realized I'd been bit by something. It looked a lot like a brown recluse spider bite. I knew without treatment it would become gangrenous, possibly even kill me. I needed antibiotics. I had one friend who had access to drugs and medical supplies, but he was in Chillicothe. I had no choice. I had to head back into enemy territory where it seemed that every living person was out to get me. I found a place where I could hole up for a while. My friend brought me antibiotics to treat the infection and some other medical supplies to clean the wounds with. I did a lot of thinking about where to go once I was healed enough. I ended up deciding on Canada.
We know that guy.
We offered a substantial amount of reward money. I don't care how loyal you are to somebody, you offer them $100,000, they're going to turn you in. They'll turn your mother in for that.
Sheriff Nichols.
We got a call from a resident.
Right.
Said they spotted John Parsons on 3 Locks Road at an old abandoned cabin.
Thank you for the call. We'll be there shortly.
We immediately responded with officers going that area.
We were very optimistic we were going to get him that day. This would be the day that would conclude the search. Got our formation, immediately went to the cabin, approached the cabin as fast as we could. We were very excited to pinpoint him. The emotion started, the adrenaline started running high.
John Parsons! Come outside with your hands up! Let me see them now!
We decided to search the cabin.
Clear! Clear!
We found out that he had a trap door in the bottom that he could go right out, and he had already escaped the cabin before we made entry.
I'd run from my escape hatch and gone to the river, but stayed in the woods. I ended up on Eastern Avenue, about a mile from the jail I'd escaped from and right next to a lumber company. Directly behind it is the tip of a wooded area owned by the railroad that had been overgrown since I was a kid. It was as good a place as any for a hideout.
He's going to commit a crime somewhere. He's going to do something. Somebody's going to see him. He's going to get picked up.
I began stealing lumber to build myself a shack. I also rounded up all the things I might need to survive in the wilderness. I needed more light for my shack. The graves of the nearby cemetery were lit up with little solar lights. So I went to a grave to pick up a couple. I looked up at the tombstone to see a big smiling portrait of Officer Larry Cox, the man I was accused of killing. I nearly fell down, I was so stunned. I felt like the man was haunting me. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I wrapped up the lights and headed back to my shack.
We received hundreds of tips we had to follow up on. So you're using all your resources following up these shadow informations that may not be anything at all, but you can't say that. You still have to follow it up.
There was moments when you thought, you know, what can we do differently? I mean, how are we going to find out where he is? You know, it was very frustrating at times.
2 months had passed since I had escaped from jail, and I felt I was finally healed enough to go ahead and move toward Canada. I asked my connection to get me a gun and 1 more bottle of antibiotics to go. My plan was to wear a Halloween mask and escape at night so I would blend in with all the trick-or-treaters. Finally, I was going to escape for good, and I could leave my old life behind me.
John Parsons has escaped from jail and has been on the run in Ross County, Ohio for 2 months.
We had got some information that said somebody had built a little crude structure in the vicinity of the Eastern Avenue Lumber Company.
We just eaten lunch. We were all standing out behind the law complex kind of talking. And the call came out that John Parsons had been seen in a shack behind the lumber store. So we were going under the assumption that, yeah, he was in there. And, you know, we were ready. I guess we were expecting the worst. You know, we thought that he would probably fire on us. You know, he'd already shot one officer. You know, what's it going to hurt to shoot 1 or 2 more? The minute I saw the tattoo on his leg of a naked lady, I knew it was John Parsons. We had him.
I want you to come out with your hands up.
And just kind of a cold chill went through my body, you know, I mean, elation, I guess. We ordered him to put his hands out, you know, and asked him if he had any weapons. He said no, the only thing he had was a knife. He pretty much, you know, gave up, and when we got him out of the shack, he almost looked relieved. You know, he had that look of relief on his face, that it was over with.
It was a huge disappointment to get caught after all I went through, trying to make the escape happen and make it work. And I also felt like life was over for me. I fully expected the death penalty.
I went back to the family, and I had got Larry's handcuffs.
Hello, John.
I said, John, I've got Larry Cox's handcuffs I'm going to put on you. And he said, okay. I had felt that it was only fitting that once John Parsons had escaped, that he should go back to jail in Larry's handcuffs.
And the little note he left me, goodbye, Ron. First thing I seen John Parsons, I told him, welcome back, John. He knew what I was saying.
I draw a lot of portraits now, and it always brings back the memory of the one I seen on the tombstone that night. I do still dream about being chased. Almost every time I remember my dreams. That's what they're about.
John Parsons will escape some other time. It may not be now, may not be next year, may not be 6 years, maybe 10 years from now, but somewhere, sometime, he will attempt to do it again.
If you missed the last episode of Breakout, you can watch it with ITV Player, available at itv.com/ITV Player, or on BT Vision and Virgin Media Digital TV on demand.